Good morning, and I want to open with something that may go against everything you've been told. For as long as most of us can remember, the message handed to older adults has been simple. Ease off. Rest more. Expect less of your body and your mind. Accept that decline is just part of the deal. But here's the thing. A wave of research from the past decade turns that whole idea on its head. What if the qualities that keep you clear-headed, steady on your feet, and living on your own terms at 76, at 82, at 87 aren't the ones written on a prescription pad at all? What if they're small, ordinary, daily choices that most people your age have quietly let slip away? My name is Dr. David Brooks. Over 20-plus years of caring for men and women in their late 70s and 80s, I've watched something unfold in my exam room that the science is only now catching up to. The people who age with real grace, the ones still behind the wheel, still pulling weeds in the garden, still rattling off every grandchild's birthday without so much as a note on the fridge, they aren't doing it with a cabinet full of pricey pills. They're doing it with habits. A large study out of a leading longevity research center tracked several thousand adults between 70 and 90 for well over a decade. And the pattern that emerged was hard to ignore. The folks who held on to just 4 or more of these particular daily habits were dramatically less likely, by a margin that researchers found genuinely surprising, to slide into the kind of rapid functional decline that pushes so many seniors into assisted living long before they ever needed to be there. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between running your own life and having it run on someone else's clock. Now, let me plant a seed before we get going, because I know the temptation is to skip ahead. The habit sitting at number 1, the most powerful of the whole list, is something hardly anyone brings up. It has next to nothing to do with diet or exercise in the way you'd expect. Most doctors won't even mention it. But research suggests it may be one of the strongest signals we have for whether a person stays mentally and physically independent past 75. So stay with me all the way through, because that last one could genuinely reshape how you think about the years ahead. Before we start, though, I want to ask you something, just between us. Tell me your age in the comments below. Whether you're 67, 73, 84, or anywhere in between, drop it down there, and let me know which of these habits you think you've already got in your corner. I read the comments on this channel. All of them. This little community means the world to me, and your story is part of it. So leave it below, and let's actually talk. All right, let's count them down, 6 all the way to 1, starting with something that sounds almost too plain to matter. But trust me, the science underneath it is anything but plain. Number 6, drinking water with a plan, not just when it crosses your mind. Here's what trips most people up about staying hydrated after 75. They assume it works the way it did at 45. It really doesn't. Once you're past 70, your kidneys lose a good chunk of their filtering power, roughly a third or more. Your sense of thirst gets dull and unreliable, which means you can be running low on fluid and feel absolutely nothing telling you to drink. And your blood's ability to ferry oxygen and nutrients up to your brain and out to your muscles fades a little more with every bit of fluid you're missing. Picture the irrigation lines running through a garden. When the water pressure drops, the far corners stop getting fed. The plants at the edges wilt first, and before long the whole plot starts to struggle. That's more or less what quiet, low-grade dehydration does to an older body, day after day, without ever announcing itself. Studies have shown that older adults who keep their fluid intake steady and adequate see noticeably fewer urinary tract infections, fewer falls, since being underhydrated wrecks your balance and slows your reactions, and they tend to score better on short-term memory tasks too. Your brain is something like 3/4 water. Even a small dip in hydration can nudge your thinking off track at any age. But after 75, that effect gets louder, because your brain is already working overtime just to keep the lights on. So here's the piece that separates the truly sharp seniors from the rest. They don't wait until they happen to remember. They drink a tall glass, 12 to 16 ounces, first thing in the morning. Before coffee, before breakfast, before anything. Your body sheds fluid all night long, through your breath and through your skin. And after 75, that overnight deficit tends to run deeper than it did in midlife. Then they take a small glass with every meal, and one more in the mid-afternoon slump. Here's a tip that quietly multiplies the effect. Pair that morning water with a little sodium. Not a shake of table salt, but a pinch of good sea salt or an electrolyte tablet stirred in. Because after 75, your kidneys have a harder time holding on to sodium, and without it, plain water can slip right through you instead of settling into the cells that actually need it. Eleanor, 79, came in to see me from Asheville, North Carolina. Worn out by an afternoon fog she couldn't shake, a little dizzy every time she stood, and, in her own words, feeling like her thoughts were moving through molasses. She chuckled when she said it, but she wasn't laughing about how it made her feel. She wasn't dehydrated in any dramatic, hospital sense. She was just chronically, mildly short on fluid. We changed one thing. We timed her water properly and added that morning pinch of electrolytes. 6 weeks on, she told me it was like someone had wiped the smudges off her glasses. Her balance steadied. That afternoon, crash softened. One habit. Real change. Number 5. Movement that pushes back, at least twice a week. I need to be careful here, because this one gets misread all the time. When I say movement that pushes back, I am not sending you off to a gym to heave heavy iron around. I mean any movement where your muscles have to work against something. A resistance band, a light dumbbell, a push against the wall, even hauling the groceries in from the car, on purpose, with a bit of grit. And that distinction matters more than you'd think after 75, because of something called anabolic resistance. Let me put it plainly. As muscle ages, it gets harder of hearing. It stops responding as readily to protein and to effort. So after 75, your body needs a louder signal, more deliberate resistance, to hold on to the same muscle a 50-year-old keeps with half the work. Your muscles aren't lazy. They're just harder to reach. And if you don't reach them regularly, they start to waste away, a slow slide called sarcopenia that research has tied to far more falls, a much higher chance of losing the ability to handle everyday tasks, and a shorter life overall. Think of an aging muscle like a wood stove. Stop feeding it, and the fire doesn't go out all at once. It just burns lower and lower until one cold morning there's nothing left but ash. Resistance work is how you keep tossing logs on. Research from major medical centers has found that adults in their late 70s and 80s who started training against resistance just twice a week saw real gains in only a couple of months. Meaningful jumps in leg strength, steadier balance. And here's the part that always raises eyebrows. Better blood sugar handling too, which feeds straight back into energy, inflammation, and how sharp you feel. The tiny power plants inside your muscle cells, the mitochondria, actually regenerate more cleanly when you're asking your muscles to work. You're not just building strength. You're rebuilding your body's whole energy grid. The prescription is simple enough. 2, maybe 3 sessions a week, 20 to 30 minutes each, aimed at the big muscle groups, your legs, your hips, your back. Resistance bands are a gift for older bodies because they load the muscle without hammering the joints. And the synergy tip. Try to get 25 to 30 grams of protein in within half an hour of finishing, because after 75, that window when your muscles soak up protein for repair is shorter and a lot less forgiving than it used to be. At your age, timing isn't a nice extra. It's the whole game. Number 4. Keeping a steady, purposeful sleep schedule. And before I go on, let me pause for just a second. If this video is doing you some good, if you're hearing things you wish somebody had told you years back, do me one small favor. Tap that subscribe button. It takes a second. And if there's someone in your life between 70 and 90 who ought to hear this, send it their way today. I mean it, because this channel exists for exactly one reason. To hand older adults the honest, science-grounded truth that a rushed 15-minute appointment almost never has room for. Now, back to sleep, because this runs far deeper than just turning in early. After 75, your internal clock, the rhythm that runs your body across each 24 hours, starts to drift and weaken. Your brain makes a fraction of the melatonin it once did. Your deep, slow-wave sleep, the most physically restorative stretch of the night, shrinks dramatically from what it was decades ago. And that's the very phase when your body releases the hormones that repair cells, shore up your immune system, and keep muscle from slipping away. And here's what a lot of people never realize. Bad sleep after 75 isn't only about feeling worn out the next day. Research suggests that older adults with broken, restless sleep build up more of the sticky plaques in the brain that scientists link to Alzheimer's. Sleep is when the brain does its housekeeping. Skip the housekeeping night after night, and the mess piles up. The seniors who do this beautifully don't just sleep more. They sleep consistently. They're in bed within the same half-hour window every night. They're up at the same time every morning, weekends included. They keep the bedroom cool, somewhere in the mid-60s, because after 75 your body handles its own temperature less gracefully during sleep, and a cooler room helps you sink into the deep rest your brain is craving. And they set the screens aside a good hour before bed, not just because of the light, but because a stirred-up, stimulated mind keeps the thinking part of your brain humming long after you've turned out the lamp. The synergy tip here: full 10 minutes of slow, deep belly breathing into your wind down. It flips your body over into its rest and repair mode, quiets the stress hormones, and makes it noticeably easier to drop into that deep sleep your aging brain depends on. Number 3. Eating protein on purpose, spread across the day. Now here's where I run into the most dangerous myth of all, and I'll be honest, it worries me as a doctor. The notion that you need less protein as you get older isn't just mistaken. It might be one of the most harmful bits of nutrition folklore ever passed down at a kitchen table. The truth runs the other direction entirely. Because of that anabolic resistance I mentioned, after 75 your body actually needs considerably more protein for every pound you carry, just to hold the same muscle a healthy 30-year-old keeps with ease. And yet most of the seniors I see are getting maybe half of what they need, often because appetite fades with the years and a bowl of something starchy is simply easier to make than a proper meal. Research suggests that older adults who take in a solid amount of protein each day, spread across 3 meals or more, hold on to meaningfully more muscle, land in the hospital far less often for fall-related injuries, and mount a stronger defense against the infections that circle every winter, the flus and the pneumonias. Think of protein as the lumber your body uses to rebuild itself while you sleep. Every night, quietly, your body tears down the old worn-out tissue and frames up something new in its place. Short the lumber yard and the construction stalls. A wall here, a beam there, left half-finished. Over months and years, those little gaps add up to a structure that can't hold your weight. Here's the practical version. Aim for something like 25 to 35 grams of protein at each of your 3 main meals. Roughly a palm-sized portion of chicken, fish, eggs, Greek yogurt, or beans. The reason spreading it out matters so much after 75 is that an aging body can only really put so much protein to work at one sitting. Pile on more than that in a single meal, and the extra just gets burned for fuel instead of used for repair. Space it out, and every gram earns its keep. Walter, 80, came to me from Green Bay, Wisconsin, after his son noticed he'd dropped close to 20 pounds that his last doctor had waved off as just getting older. It was not just getting older. He was losing muscle, not fat, and his grip strength, which happens to be one of the better predictors of how long an older adult will thrive, had fallen way down toward the bottom of the pack for men his age. We rebuilt his meals around deliberate protein. 12 weeks later, he'd put back a good chunk of that as lean muscle. His grip had climbed back into a healthy range, and he tapped the desk with his knuckle and told me, grinning, that he'd carried every last bag of groceries in from the truck himself for the first time in 2 years. The synergy tip: pair those protein meals with a little vitamin C, a few orange slices, some bell pepper, a squeeze of lemon, because vitamin C is what your body leans on to build collagen. And collagen works hand in hand with dietary protein to keep not only your muscle but your joints, your cartilage, and the very scaffolding that holds you together intact after 75. Number 2. Real human connection, on purpose, every single day. I promised you earlier that one of the top 2 would catch you off guard. This is that one. It surprises people because it sounds too gentle, too tender to belong on a list of medical advice. But let me be crystal clear. The science tying human connection to a longer, sharper life in adults over 75 is not soft science. It's some of the sturdiest, most repeatable evidence in the entire field. Large-scale research has found that being chronically cut off from other people carries a risk to your lifespan on par with smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Let me say that once more, slowly. Deep, ongoing loneliness is about as hard on how long you live as lighting up 15 cigarettes every single day. And for adults past 75, studies have shown that isolation speeds up mental decline, raises the odds of dementia, and drives up the inflammation quietly coursing through the bloodstream. The kind that chips away at your heart, your immune system, and the wiring of your brain. Here's why it reaches so deep. Genuine connection, and I mean the real thing. Not sitting in the same room as the television, not a passive nod across the porch, but actual engaged back and forth. Sets off a cascade of the chemistry that calms your stress response, dials down inflammation, and keeps the front of your brain lit up and busy. Think of your social brain like a fiddle left in the closet. The strings that sing when you're deep in conversation, sharing a laugh, arguing a point, are the very same strings that hold your memory, your judgment, your sense of who you are. Leave them untouched for weeks on end, and they go slack. And after 75, your brain rebuilds those connections far more grudgingly than it once did. The prescription isn't complicated, but it has to be intentional. Aim for at least one real, in-person connection every single day. A phone call counts if you're truly in it. A church group, a walking buddy, a standing lunch with the neighbor down the street. What doesn't count, at least not for your brain, is just being near people. You have to be in it, thinking, answering, laughing, disagreeing, sharing. That engagement is the exercise that keeps the whole structure standing. Ruth, 84, from Savannah, Georgia, lost her husband of more than 50 years and folded almost entirely inward. Her daughter brought her to me the better part of a year later, and on the standard assessments, she'd slipped noticeably in a matter of months. We didn't touch her medications. We built her a social calendar, a weekly book club, a daily 20-minute phone call that rotated through her friends and family, and 2 mornings a week volunteering at the library shelving returns. Months on, her scores had climbed back toward where they'd started. Her inflammation numbers came down. Her daughter told me, with her eyes shining, that Ruth seemed like herself again. Connection isn't a luxury at 75 and beyond. It's a biological need, plain and simple. The synergy tip: braid that connection together with movement whenever you can. A walk with a friend, a gentle class in a room full of people, weeding the garden beside a neighbor. Research suggests that pairing company with even light activity gives your brain a bigger boost than either one on its own, feeding the very growth factors that act like fertilizer for your brain cells. You want all of that you can get. And now, number 1. The habit that only a small fraction of adults over 75 actually keep up, and which researchers have called one of the most overlooked longevity tools available without a prescription. Number 1. A daily, deliberate mental challenge. Not crosswords. Not skimming a paperback. Both have their place, but I'm pointing at something more specific, more demanding, and honestly more transformative. The daily practice of learning something genuinely new. A skill, a language, an instrument, some fresh form of making things that shoves your brain into what I like to call productive discomfort. Here's why it earns the top spot. After 75, your brain starts leaning hard on the roads it already knows. It gets remarkably good at the familiar and remarkably reluctant to lay down anything new. That's not a flaw in your character. It's an aging brain trying to save energy by sticking to the paths already worn in. But that very preference for the familiar is exactly how your mental reserve gets drained. Cognitive reserve is your brain's cushion, its capacity to absorb the wear of aging and still run well. The more of it you've banked, the more your brain can take before you ever feel a step slip. Think of it like a trail through the woods. Walk the same path every day and it packs down into a rut, easy and automatic. But let the rest of the forest grow wild and untraveled, and the day a tree falls across your one-worn path, you've got no other way through. Learning something new is how you keep cutting fresh trails, so there's always another route. Research following adults from their 70s well into their late 80s suggests that those who took on novel, genuinely challenging mental work for half an hour a day held on to better processing speed and memory, showed slower shrinkage of the brain on scans, and were meaningfully less likely to be diagnosed with dementia in the years that followed. Other work has found that older adults who describe their days as mentally rich tend to test like people a full decade younger. The engine under all of this is neuroplasticity, your brain's power to rewire itself by forging new connections. And while that power does fade with age, it never switches off entirely. The brain holds on to its capacity for real, structural change deep into the 80s, but only when you give it a reason to. Novel learning is that reason. Picking up a new language lights up several regions of the brain at once and has been linked to pushing dementia's onset back by years. Learning an instrument pulls together fine motor control, hearing, memory, and feeling all at the same time, in a way nothing else quite matches. Even learning to cook an unfamiliar cuisine from scratch, with its reading and its sequencing and its careful attention, gives the brain a real workout. Here's the practical shape of it. Pick one genuinely new skill every 3 or 4 months, and spend at least 20 to 30 minutes a day actively working at it. Actively is the word that matters. Watching a fellow play guitar on a screen is not learning guitar. Sitting there with the thing in your lap, fumbling through a chord change and getting it wrong and trying again, that is. The struggle, that productive discomfort, is where the good stuff happens. It's the mental version of lifting against resistance. The resistance is the whole point. Frank, 81, came to see me from Santa Fe, New Mexico. 40 years an accountant, and by his own cheerful admission, he'd spent the first stretch of retirement doing almost nothing that truly stretched his mind. He came in worried about names slipping away from him and conversations getting harder to follow. His scans looked about right for his age, nothing alarming, but his mental reserve was thinner than I'd have liked. I gave him one instruction. Pick something you always meant to learn, and do it every day. He chose watercolor painting, something he'd never once tried. He was, by his own account, dreadful at first, and he'd tap the table and laugh telling you so. A year and a half later, he'd finished more than 20 paintings, joined a local art circle, which quietly took care of habit number 2 right alongside it. And his follow-up testing showed real improvement across several areas. Improvement, not just holding steady, getting better. At 81. The synergy tip. Pair your daily mental challenge with omega-3 fats, especially the kind called DHA, the sort you find in fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines, or in a good fish oil. DHA is the main building fat in your brain cells' outer walls, and research suggests that people with more of it in their systems get more out of the mental work they put in. In other words, DHA helps your brain actually absorb what you're learning. It's the fertilizer under the seed. The sources behind everything I've shared today are down in the description. I'd encourage you to read them, bring them to your own doctor, and have a real conversation about what fits your particular situation. Now let me close with something I mean from the bottom of my heart. Because I've sat across from enough people in their late 70s and 80s to know that this stretch of life gets treated far too often like a countdown instead of a continuation. It isn't. Everything I've laid out today points to a truth medicine is only starting to fully grasp that the body and the mind at 75, at 80, at 85 hold onto a stubborn, remarkable capacity to bounce back. Not in spite of age. In conversation with it. The 6 habits we walked through today, water with a plan, movement that pushes back, sleep with a rhythm, protein on purpose, connection every day, and a mind that keeps learning, none of them are about turning the clock backward. They're about making the fullest, richest use of the time the clock still holds. They're about carrying your own groceries in from the car, remembering the names of every grandchild, driving yourself to your own appointments, laughing until your eyes water across the dinner table from someone who matters to you. That's what independence looks like. That's what a good life feels like. And I promise you, I've watched it happen with my own 2 eyes, in people who'd been told there was nothing left worth improving. It is never, ever too late to start. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, go ahead and do that right now. Every week, I bring you research-backed, senior-specific health information that I truly believe can add good years to your life. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss one. And now I want to hear from you. Leave your age down in the comments and tell me which of these 6 habits you feel strongest in today and which one you want to build next. I'll be reading every reply. This is one of the most thoughtful, warm-hearted communities I've ever had the privilege to be part of, and that's entirely because of you. I'll see you in the next one. Take good care of yourself, because you are more than worth the effort.